Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and joining me today is Claudine Francois. Claudine is a board-certified functional medicine and holistic health practitioner. With expertise in uncovering the root causes of chronic issues, she uses comprehensive tests and a holistic approach to craft personalized protocols to optimize energy, clarity, and vitality. Claudine, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure to be here.
So I'm going to just announce, and I've already told you this off the air, but I'm losing my voice, you guys. So please bear with my scratchy voice. I'll try not to have a coughing fit on the show, but just wanted to let you guys know that I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. All right, that out of the way. I think you know that I've done a few episodes already on functional medicine, but the interest is still there. People want to go another level deeper and kind of really understand what it brings to the toolbox, how to get in, that kind of stuff. So I was hoping that you could help us kind of explore some of those topics today.
I would love to.
I know it's your favorite topic these days. So.
I know people kind of have to tell me to stop talking about it.
Hey, that's a good sign. That means you're leaning into your passion, right? And it means you're in alignment. So it's interesting how that happens. Time just gets away with you and kind of, you don't even know that you're working when things are lined up right. So it's a good thing. I think I want to start by asking you, from your experience, what do you think the key difference is between functional medicine and traditional Western medicine?
That's a really good question. For me, it's a question of where they're looking. So I have in my mind, I'm a math person. I spent 25 years in accounting. So everything to me is like an Excel spreadsheet or a grid of some sort. So I see this line of, if you look at someone's labs, for example, their blood labs, and you have all the way on the left is, you're super low. Somewhere in the middle is ideal. And then far off to the right is, well, you're too high. And the doctors are only looking at what is too high or what is extremely too low. They're not looking at, if you're not ideal, what does that mean? So they're looking to diagnose, right? They're looking at, is this at the point where I can give someone a medication or I need to do surgery? Like they're looking at disease markers. But in functional medicine, we're looking at the in-between states. We're looking at where you don't feel great, but you're not yet diagnosable. So I call it the sweet spot where, we're trying to get you back to feeling amazing. We're trying to help your health heal so you can get back to feeling great before you get to the diagnosable spot. So we're looking at pre-disease markers. So I think that's a big difference is pre-disease versus disease. The doctors are great when you have an emergency, right?
Yeah.
You need a surgery, you have a life-altering illness that's already been diagnosed and there's nothing for you but allopathic medicine or traditional Western medicine. But in the functional world, we're in that kind of, I'll call it a gray area.
Yeah.
Where we want to get you back to optimal health, but you're not yet diagnosable with a thing.
Yeah, a thing. And that elusiveness of the thing is often what drives people to you, I would imagine.
Well, it's a very frustrating place to be because your doctors keeps telling you, oh, you're normal. Your blood lab work is normal. Everything's good. And you're like, I do not feel good. How can everything be good?
Yeah.
So yeah, when people come to me, they've usually already gone through the ringer with traditional medicine, haven't gotten the results they've been looking for, and are just so frustrated.
So let's talk a little bit about the tests. You mentioned that a couple times already. And I know that's a key to the work you do. But what I learned on previous episodes is there's a lot of tests out there and there's a lot of different things to look at. And a lot of people, after having listened to the first couple of episodes, got really excited. They want to think about doing something, trying to explore it more, but it can be a little overwhelming, both in the not knowing what to do, but also in the cost of it. So If you were telling somebody a great place to start, where would you have them start and why?
So I always start with the HTMA, which is the hair tissue mineral analysis. And I believe one of your guests may have talked about that test before. It's a great test for understanding kind of what I will call the basics of what's going on in your health. Because if you think of minerals, calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, as I call them the tugboats. When you have a big boat, it needs to get into the port. It can't, it's like too big. It needs help. It needs somebody a little to push them or to guide them. And so the minerals are the tugboats that help all of these different enzymatic reactions in the body actually happen without them either being in the right levels themselves or being in the right ratio compared to each other. If they are not in that alignment, these things in your body do not happen. So when we take the hair tissue mineral analysis test, we can give you or whoever takes it a personalized multivitamin that helps bring those back into balance. We can also assess if you have heavy metals, like a lot of people will have mercury or aluminum, or where I live, like rocky places, is a ton of uranium because it's in the water and the soil and air. But once you get that test, you get this personalized multivitamin. A lot of people start to feel better right away because you're getting this cellular energy. The nutrients are getting to where they need to go and they're getting in. That's barring, of course, if you have any other issues like gut issues, or let's say you have, hormone imbalances, what have you. But this is like the first step, because it's, even if you do go down the road of gut health and doing a GI map, you still need your body to have the cellular energy to be able to handle that work.
That's true.
Because gut work is serious business. Like if you think of your gut, it goes all the way from your mouth to the other end. It takes up a ton of real estate in your body, but revamping that, working on that takes a lot of energy from your body. So you need to build that energy up with having the right mineral profile.
When I hear you say that, I imagine that some people will be thinking, well, I already take a multivitamin. So, why isn't my multivitamin giving me what I need?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it could be that isn't what your body needs.
Fair.
Like, how do you know that your body needs the amount of calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium that's in that multivitamin?
The bottle tells me.
Right. Yeah. Maybe you need more of certain things. Maybe you need less of certain things. And actually what I see a ton of is I see a lot of people who are taking vitamins that are actually making things worse.
Really?
So a lot of people, like 80% of the population is what we call slow oxidizers, meaning that their adrenals are kind of stressed out.
Shocker.
And that and that their thyroid isn't doing great, meaning their metabolism is low. And so you're in a state of what's called slow oxidation or slow metabolism. And if you take excess calcium and vitamin D, you're actually making it slower.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And especially for the people who are stressed to the point where their body is leaching calcium from the bones to try to calm the body. If they are taking more calcium, they're just putting more calcium in the bloodstream, and that could end up as gallstones. It could end up as kidney stones, calcification of the arteries, and people would get high blood pressure. It could end up as joint pain because calcium is a really sharp mineral. So when people are taking calcium and vitamin D supplements, I say stop.
Yeah, test.
It's the first thing we need to stop. Let's find out what your body truly needs and make sure that we're giving it the right nutrients.
And that one test, is that like I send in a piece of hair? How does that work?
Yeah, you do.
And that one test, though, will give you the levels. It doesn't fluctuate, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask. So if I give you a piece of hair today, it's going to tell you my levels today, or it sticks in. I mean, it's pretty consistent, so you can tell. Is that a dumb question?
No, it's a great question. And actually, the best part about this test is we're taking 1.5 inches of the hair from the root. So that's giving us about 90 to 120 days worth of data.
Oh.
So unlike a blood test where it's like only right now, this is what you are right now. This is giving us a window of this is how your body has been over the last 3 months. So it gives us a really great way to analyze overall, how is your body responding to certain things? What is your body dealing with?
That's pretty cool. I wouldn't have thought of that. I want to ask you about another test that I didn't originally plan to ask you about, but I heard you talking about it on a show, an interview, or somewhere, maybe in your Facebook group. But you talked about the neurotransmitter test. I got super interested because, well, let's tell the audience, how is it administered? What does it tell us? What is it? I wanted you to give that little overview because it got me super interested because some of the things that you were talking about, I was like, wow, there's going to be a lot of interest in that one.
Yeah, it is super interesting. So how is it administered? It's urine-based sample.
Okay.
So you're basically pee in a cup and send it to the lab. It's not fun. I love going to UPS and handing them a bag and they have no idea. Funniest thing. I'm like, here you go. And it says like biohazard on it and have fun. So that's how it's administered. What does it tell us? So it tells us, and most people are going to know these neurotransmitters when I say them. It tells us the levels of serotonin, dopamine, things like GABA, our epinephrine and our norepinephrine. So it tells us all these different levels, which when they are off, people will have anxiety or depression, or they can have weight issues. A lot of people are taking Ozempic now to stop the noise, the food noise.
Yes.
Well, a lot of those could be attributed to a neuro imbalance. People have ADD, ADHD, anything that you think of that is brain related, we can see in the levels of your neurotransmitters what's happening, and then we can address it from that level. And even people who are on a prescription, like let's say they're on a prescription for, let's say on Prozac or they're on something for ADHD, we can see if that prescription is targeting the correct neurotransmitter. In other words, is this prescription even working for you?
Wow. Now I'm going to geek out because that's pretty amazing. I could see why you love this stuff. So, two things. You said something that I know antennas are going to go up when you're talking about the weight loss drugs and people going on them to stop the chatter. That really is the biggest reason people are going on them right now from the circles I keep, because that chatter is really hard to deal with. And you're saying that you can see in those tests why the chatter is there or that the chatter is there.
I can see which neurotransmitter is off that could be creating the chatter.
Got it. Okay. And I think you said when you were talking about it elsewhere, it also will show you sleep indicators.
It is a great test to run for people who have sleep issues, chronic sleep issues, because based on where your neurotransmitters are falling, it could be an indication that something else is going on. And I don't know if you wanted to go into the brain gut connection, but essentially, 90% of our neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So they are brain chemicals, but they're made in the gut. So if our gut is off, like we have too many bad bacteria, not enough good bacteria, we have viruses, parasites, worms, candida, fungal infections, you name it, leaky gut, which I see all the time. If you have these gut imbalances, you are not going to have the right levels of neurotransmitters, because how can your gut deal with making serotonin if it's too busy trying to eke out any kind of nutrients, from whatever it's getting based on what it has to go through to get there?
So that's a good indication or a good example of how one test would lead to another, because you do the neurotransmitter, you'd see that there's a problem there, potentially pointing to the leaky gut or something else going on in the gut. Then I assume you would do a different test, that other test that really gets all the details of what's going on in your gut.
Well, a lot of people in the functional world, they have a set number of tests that they run
together.
So if you want to work with them, all together, they say, for example, I have a colleague who she's called the sleep detective. And so every client, they get the neurotransmitter test. They get a hormone panel called the Dutch. It's a stress and hormone panel. They get the GI map, which is the gut one. And they get the HTMA, the hair one.
All the big ones.
And all those 4 tests are going to give her a great window to see what is, the body doesn't work in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's not like the thyroid decides one day, oh, I'm just not going to, I need a me day. I don't feel like doing my thing today. Yeah. It's usually from a gut issue, and which then impacts the hormones. It impacts the liver. There's this whole cascade of issues that can happen just from one thing being off. So when, in traditional medicine, to your first question, each doctor is usually only looking at what I call one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you think of the body as a puzzle and all the different, you have the heart doctor, and you have the GI doctor, and you have the endocrinologist, and you have the brain specialist. They each have their own piece of the puzzle. They don't want to look at any of the other pieces, and no one else gets to look at their piece. So they are treating each part of the body as if it's completely separate and it's not related to anything else. But in functional medicine, we want to see as many of those pieces as possible to see how everything is interacting, because we know thing A could be affecting thing B, which is affecting thing C, and then affecting thing D, which you actually came to us for D.
Yeah.
But there was this whole path that led us to get to why D is happening.
That is such a complaint that I hear of so often with people in general medicine practices that, we all have these primary, a lot of our insurances require these primary doctors, but they're not really primary doctors. They send us elsewhere, but they don't connect the dots. You need a dot connector. So, right? I mean, you need somebody that can really draw the conclusions across.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a dot connector. I love it. We should make a new position.
Yeah.
The dot connector.
Yeah. So back on testing again, I want to go back to when we talked, you talked about how a thyroid testing, right? People will normally get their thyroid tested from it's a traditional workup. I think you get your thyroid tested when you go for your annual exam or whatever, and you fall somewhere in that crazy big window range and you're probably okay. And you were saying, I think you were telling an example of how very different it is when you look at a thyroid from a functional medicine perspective. Can you sort of elaborate on that?
I would love to. So when you get your traditional workup at the doctor, they're usually running one thyroid marker, TSH, which stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. And that one marker, they're looking at a huge range, usually anywhere from 0 to 4, and in functional medicine, we're looking at 1 to 2 as the ideal range. But if you're within, because someone who's at a 3 is going to feel awful. They're going to have terrible metabolism. They're probably going to be really exhausted all the time, but they're not going to be diagnosed with anything until 4. Having said that, there are plenty of people who are in the quote unquote normal range for thyroid, but their thyroid is not functioning correctly. And that's because they're not usually getting all of those other markers. So there are about 8 or 9 markers that you can run. And each of those markers is going to tell us something different. They'll tell us, for example, do you have an iodine deficiency? Now, iodine is the building block to the thyroid hormone. You can't make thyroid without either iodine or selenium, right? So there's another marker that will tell us if you're selenium deficient. And so if you don't have enough of those, it's not that your thyroid isn't working. It's not that it's not producing hormone. It's just it cannot produce enough because it doesn't have those base elements it needs to create thyroid hormone. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is that I always include the antibody markers in my thyroid panels. So when I have a client run a thyroid panel, it includes 8 markers, 2 of which are what we call antibodies. So it's the TPO antibodies and the TG antibodies. And those tell us if there's something else going on in the body that's making the body attack the thyroid hormone or the thyroid. To give you an example, I had a client recently. She was on Wegovy, which is like an Ozempic. Mm-hmm. She'd had some weight issues. She was also on an anxiety medication. And she was super sluggish and tired all the time. So in addition to the normal tests, we also ran a thyroid panel, and her TPO antibodies, so it's thyroid peroxidase antibodies, they're not supposed to be higher than 10. Hers were over 600.
Wow. And that wouldn't show up on the normal test that you get at your doctor's.
No. And here's the thing. Now, I am not a physician. I cannot diagnose. But anyone who has over 100 on that marker most likely has Hashimoto's.
Wow.
So they'd have to go to a doctor to get diagnosed. And actually, she just messaged me this morning. She did go to the doctor and did get diagnosed with Hashimoto's. But she wouldn't have known that from her normal blood work. She'd been getting blood work for years. Yeah. And no one had even mentioned it to her. And the number one thing that triggers an autoimmune like Hashimoto's is gut issues.
Really?
Because to get Hashimoto's, you need to have 3 things. You have to have a genetic predisposition, which we can't do much about. You need to have leaky gut, and you need to have some kind of trigger, like some kind of stressful thing happening, either like mental, emotional stress or a physical stressor. Like for her, she had a bunch of gut bugs that we needed to deal with. So that would have been a stressor. So we can deal with items 2 and 3, right? We can deal with the leaky gut. We can deal with the gut bugs. And then she would go into what's called remission, where she didn't feel all of the horrible feelings that you would feel from an autoimmune issue. But the doctors, their default is, I'm just going to give you thyroid meds. And anyone who's had Hashimoto's knows that does not solve the problem by far. And they still have flare-ups because the number one thing they need to do is get off gluten, dairy, sugar, and alcohol, because those are all super inflammatory. So for someone with Hashimoto's, it's particularly important.
I actually know a couple people that listen that have it. So this is really great information. The thing that's running through my head that I can't wrap my mind around is, if the points that you made are true always, why on earth aren't the doctors doing those other tests to say, here's what's going on, and here's how you fix it? Ultimately, you could kind of tell how you fix it at that point. If it's a gut issue, is it really that obvious? Your face is telling the story. So it doesn't make sense to me.
I know, it's super frustrating. Now, I mean, the short answer would be that's not how they're trained.
Mm.
They're trained, run the basic labs. If somebody pops up with over 4 for TSH, for example,
Yeah.
then they might run a 4 panel marker. But they're really not running. They're basically doing the bare minimum at each step. Like, they wouldn't run the antibody test unless you knew or had some kind of glaring, obvious reason why you would need to have it run. They're running the basics, and then maybe they'll go further. They'll go deeper if they're seeing what they need to see in the basics. So for TSH, the reason why TSH is so misleading is because if someone could have a normal TSH number, but then you dive into the other markers and you see, for example, that 600 TPO antibody number, or you see the iodine and selenium deficiency, which of course doctors wouldn't really know what to do with that anyway. But the TSH is the big thing for them. If they can diagnose you with something, that's their jam.
Yeah.
Right. Diagnose you, give you a prescription, and have a great day.
Wow. So what I'm really, really solidifying in my mind is these tests, I guess they're really not a replacement for traditional or Western medicine, but boy, they certainly can inform it. It's a lot more information.
Absolutely. Well, and the great news is, even if you use I do a free lab review. Every once in a while, I'll offer a free lab review of the blood labs that people will get at their annual review.
Just the normal ones, just for people that don't know, just the normal ones. Yeah.
Yeah, just the normal ones. And also you can buy those at ulta.com, ultalabs.com. You could always buy your own set of labs if you didn't want to go through your doctor, and I will review them, because people are not being told about those pre-disease markers. They're not being told, like, okay, if you're within the range, but you don't feel right, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What road am I heading down that I might want to make a U-turn?
Yeah. Yeah. Get in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about hormone testing a little bit. This has been a topic that's come up multiple times because we've done a few episodes around women's health issues, really how we're not really served well in the traditional Western medicine doctor's office. And the topic of hormonal testing, I guess there's a couple of schools of thought. Some are that, it's not worth doing what they could typically do because there's so many variables. The message of what it tells you isn't real clear and they don't know what to do about it. And then I think there's people that think if they could have hormones tested, will maybe give them the answers that they're looking for. Where do you sit on that? And how in-depth are the tests that you would do for hormonal testing versus what a doctor's office would do? A typical traditional doctor's office.
So to answer your first question, I'm all about hormone testing.
Okay.
But it has to be the right test, because blood tests for hormones is the worst way to test hormones. And the reason why doctors use blood labs is because your body protects the blood at all costs. So when something shows up in your blood, it is a full-blown emergency. That's why they're using that medium. I mean, aside from the fact that it's cheap, right? It's relatively inexpensive to do blood labs. But it also, like, once it's in there, they're like, oh, now we know what to do. Because again, Western medicine is designed for the emergency. It's designed for the diagnosis. So why are blood labs not great for hormones? Well, number one, they're only testing one point in time, and your hormones fluctuate throughout the day, right? They're going up and down, up and down, up and down. If like you look at a graph that just constantly has peaks and valleys, that's what your hormones are doing. So where are you catching that hormone? Are you catching it at the upswing? Are you catching it on the bottom swing? Are you catching it somewhere in the middle? You don't know. The second reason why you don't want to test for hormones in blood, or it's not really going to tell you much, is that the blood hormone is going to tell you the whole hormone. It's not going to tell you what we call the free hormone or the available hormone. And that's what we want to know. We want to know how much is available. Because who cares if you have tons of estrogen in your body if only some of it's available? I mean, that's just going to mean if you have a bunch that's available, great. If you have a bunch that's unavailable, that means you have estrogen dominance, which leads to a whole other conversation about other issues caused by estrogen dominance. But the best ways to test for hormones so that you can get not only several points in time, so you get a bigger data set, determine what your true levels are, but also to get the free amount of the hormone would either be saliva testing or urine-based testing. And both of those are good for both the cortisol, finding out where you are in the cortisol response. Like, are you stressed out all the time? Have you been stressed out so long that you're no longer making cortisol? Like, where are you in that? But also the hormone levels.
And if you do a saliva test, in my brain, I'm thinking that still it's similar to blood. You get in a point in time, but no?
No, because your saliva is just kind of around.
Just lingering around.
And plus we're doing it 4 times throughout the day.
Okay.
When you do a saliva panel, you're doing 4 different samples.
That makes sense to me.
And same thing with the urine sample. You're doing 4 different ones, so you're getting an average.
That makes sense to me. Okay. So what are the kind of things that you pick up on then? I'm assuming just super high levels of, the normal, super high levels or super low levels.
Absolutely. Well, you'll see it's what's really interesting. So I work mostly with women who are between 40 and 60.
Mm-hmm.
So they're usually in that perimenopause/menopause stage of life.
Yeah.
And so hormones can do really crazy things because as we get older, we're gradually losing estradiol, which is our most potent estrogen. And as you have estrogen loss or estrogen's reducing, you can get a cascade of other issues. Like I'll have a lot of women who have chronic UTIs. And the reason for that is that estrogen helps keep the vaginal microbiome balanced because it promotes this good bacteria that keeps away all the bad guys. And so when
crazy.
you have, I know.
Right. I honestly didn't know that connection until fairly recently, but it's so crazy.
Yeah. So we'll see estrogen levels and progesterone levels, which if you don't have a good level of either one, you can have all kinds of, symptoms, right? So you might not be sleeping well. You might have breast tenderness. You might be irritable. There's like people who are estrogen dominant have more belly fat. Like, a lot of women I talk to will say, it's not that I'm not at my right weight. It's that the composition of where the weight is, it's changed. And I'd really like it to go back. So it's not just about the individual levels, but where they are in relation to each other. So even if you have low estrogen and low progesterone, you can still be estrogen dominant if estrogen is higher than progesterone. Because the body likes balance and it has so many ways to keep that balance. Estrogen and progesterone is just one of them where they keep each other in check. And when one is off, you have all of these crazy symptoms. I will often also every once in a while see what we call the androgens. So testosterone and DHEA high. And DHEA is that hormone that offsets cortisol that builds us back after our cortisol has just trashed our bodies. Because cortisol it actually needs, it's called catabolic because it breaks down parts of our body for that burst of energy that we need all the time because our mind thinks that we're running away from the tiger. So we need DHEA to build things back up when we're in a rest and digest state, which unfortunately isn't often these days for most of us.
Yeah.
But when you see high androgens, so the testosterone and DHEA, you could have PCOS type symptoms. You have the oily skin and hair. You keep be irritable and angry. And, there's like all of these high testosterone. You could have blood sugar handling issues, right? So when we see all these different variables in relation to what the person is coming to us for, right? We call it the presentation, their symptomology. We use all of that information together to develop a protocol because again, we know these things aren't in a vacuum.
Yeah. So connected.
And they're having a knock-on effect.
It's really quite amazing how connected it all is. Really. I was going to ask you about the gut connection, but you already talked about that a little bit. So I'm going to ask you your opinion on pre and probiotics. Again, we've touched on that in numerous shows. And quite frankly, I think it's kind of all over the place. And still, there's a lot of mystery there on whether or not people should be just grabbing one off the counter, because you can get them off the counter now, right? Super easy. And, they were marketed so much that people think they need them now. Is that the right thing to do for everybody to go out and start self-administering pre and probiotics?
Well, I think the danger with administering anything without really having the data is that you don't know if your body needs it and you don't know if it's going to be harmful. So, and before I got into functional medicine, I played this game too. I was like, oh, well, somebody said I need fish oil. Oh, somebody said I need vitamin D. Oh, somebody said I needed probiotics.
Exactly.
Like, you end up having 15 things you're taking because you don't really know. So hoping one of them is going to solve all your problems, or maybe all of them will solve all your problems.
Silver bullet. Where is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about pre and probiotics. So prebiotics, I like to think of in terms of foods. So, the prebiotics are basically kind of like the fertilizer, so that when you have probiotics come in, they have a nice, warm, cozy, hospitable place to land and to grow, right? So prebiotics, I think of like onions, leeks, Jerusalem artichoke, like all of those wonderful foods. The garlic is a great one. Those are prebiotics. And it's actually kind of hard if you've ever had to give up onions or garlic. It's actually really hard because they're in a lot of things. Like every soup pretty much starts with those.
Yeah.
And so I would just say eat those. Now, when it comes to probiotics, some people I see when I do their gut panel, they have overgrowth. And as I mentioned, the body likes balance. It's not like, oh, I have a ton of good bacteria, so everything's good, because the body doesn't want too much or too few. If too many bacteria, it means it's breaking down everything too much, and you're not actually getting the benefit of the nutrients because it already broke them down and got them out. So too many probiotics is, I don't want to say just as bad, but it's not good. This is not enough or not good.
So the answer from your opinion is don't do it without testing.
Yes. And I will say that I probably am biased because I love numbers and I love data, but I also have seen several times where people are doing things that they think are good and it's actually having the opposite effect.
That's fair. What is the biggest thing that you've seen or come across that surprises you?
Well, I would say one of the things that I've seen recently that have been surprising, I'm seeing a lot of parasites, and I'm seeing a lot of H. pylori with virulence factors, which virulence factors are pretty rare. And basically that H. pylori is a spiral shaped bacteria that burrows into your stomach lining and it neutralizes the stomach acid around it. And about 50% of the population has H. pylori, but the virulence factor make it really sticky, make it hard to get out. And, even seeing hundreds and hundreds of tests, you probably only see 2 virulence factors a year. I've already seen 2 this year. I saw 2 in 1 month. That was surprising. But I guess maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but it's a little saddening is how hard women are on themselves.
Yeah.
Especially the women I work with. They're all like go-getters, kick butt, used to doing all the things for all the people. And when their body tells them, you got to stop, it's really hard for them to listen. And then they get so mad at themselves. They're like, why can't I do all the things I used to do? Why am I so tired? Am I just getting older? And they beat up on themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, it's not you, but it is you. Because like you've pushed your body to this point, but you can stop and change that.
Yeah.
And heal and change how things go going forward. You can't change the past, but we can stop, evaluate, make some changes, and then going forward, you can do things differently.
I couldn't agree more. I actually just put a post up about this the other day, that for us women that grew up as high performers, high achievers, do everything for all the people, when your body is calling for a day of rest, it's really hard to learn to rest. And I'm glad that I've gotten to that point. And I took a day, this is what I posted about, and I literally did 0 things. But for years, I would never have been able to do 0 things, even if I felt horrible. We just don't allow ourselves to really listen to ourselves. We're so busy producing and being and helping and doing all the things for all the people. And I know for some of us, that is a response to trauma, right? Having to be busy, wearing the busy badge, not being able to rest, not being able to sit and relax and not be busy physically. But the thing is, we have to shift that. We have to practice.
Yeah. And our societal programming doesn't help either.
100%.
Because it's like, I'll sleep when I die,
Yeah.
or, you need to be
Yeah.
superwoman. And it's almost a badge of honor to be busy.
Yes. Busy badge. We've talked about a busy badge. Yes. Yes. And it's all the external things that you're trying to go after that, those are the things that make you successful versus taking the time you need to actually treat yourself and your body
Mm-hmm.
the way it needs to be treated and really showing up and being present in your own life. So interesting.
That's why sometimes it's really helpful to have someone in your corner reminding you, hey,
Yes.
remember how you killed yourself last year and you told yourself you weren't going to do that anymore? Maybe we should try resting, taking a day off.
Right. Those are the best people to have around you. Those people who can do that, but are also people that can kick you in the butt when you're slacking off and you need that push, right? Those are really the best people that can do it both ways.
Mm.
Well, this has been super informative. Before I kind of wind us down, is there anything we didn't touch on that you want the audience to know about?
Well, I'll just say that it's easy to think that, oh, Claudine's got it all handled. She's got it together. Like why is she so perfect? It's so annoying. And I will say, back to my previous comment about it's really hard for us to give ourselves a break. I had to go through my healing journey twice because I also could not give myself a break. I did not address the underlying reasons or tendencies that made me want to push myself to the brink. So even though I physically, quote unquote, healed my body, I hadn't healed the mental predispositions or,
Yeah.
my way of being in the world that had gotten me there in the first place. So it's a two-pronged, I don't want to call it attack, but you need to address it from both the physical aspect as well as the mental, emotional, how did I get here aspect in order to truly heal. Because if you don't do that, you'll just wind up like I did and had to do it a second time. You just wind up back at that same spot all over again and probably worse.
That's a really, really good point because the issues that you were having is sort of what led you down this path. And then to think that you were healed just to get back to that same spot. But obviously there was a lesson there that you needed to learn and now teach to other people, right? But it's a really good point. I feel like any of this leveling up, any of this self-development, personal development work, any wellness journey, really anytime you're trying to shift your old patterns of behavior or belief patterns, there's so many prongs to it. It's not single-threaded. It's across the board. And I feel like this fits right into that. Yes, there's some underlying health things, but the reason it got that bad often is because there's some also accompanying mindset work and behavior patterns that need to change.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Fantastic conversation, loaded with information. If I'm going to put all your links out there so folks can check out your work. I will tell folks that you have a new Facebook group, fairly new Facebook group, and you're doing a lot of great work in there. So you talked about the free readouts of anybody that volunteers really to have their lab work read, and you do some very informative sessions throughout the week to sort of break down some of this stuff to a really consumable level for folks. So I think that's something people should check out if they're interested in any of these topics at all. And then I didn't want to leave without saying out loud, even though we'll put the links out there, but saying out loud, you have your own podcast, Healthy, Delicious Lifestyle with Claudine. And I just want to put that out there because that's mostly you interviewing other people, but on a lot of the topics that cross along these same lines. So anybody who wants to learn more or hear more of your work, they should check that out. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.